Good morning, everyone. Glad to see everyone up and about so early on day 2 of MIPJunior. I'm David Kleeman. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Trends for Dubit. Dubit is a research and strategy company and digital studio. Company's based in Leeds in England, but I am based in New York, so they're outposts, as it were. The panel that we've got this morning is going to be talking about immersive experiences for kids and families, location-based entertainment, and also the incorporation of some immersive technologies like virtual reality to extend experiences into spaces that connect the screen and, I guess, for lack of a better word, real life. And I want to briefly frame the conversation we're going to have today with some research from Dubit. This is a combination of research from our trends survey. Every 6 months we go out into the field with 1,000 families in the US, 1,000 in the UK, and at least one other country, often 2 or 3 other countries, just to get a sense of what kids are doing, what they're watching, what they're playing, what they're reading, all that. And I'm also going to work in, there's a little bit of that comes from research we've done for various clients. And there are 2 trends that I'm going to highlight in particular. One is how the paradox of choice, too much choice in kids' lives, has led children and families to migrate towards brands that are also platforms. So not just existing in one place, but that exist across a number of places. And 2 is how parental attitudes influence what they choose for children and families. So even in the last 18 months, we've seen in our trends survey that the volume of brands kids quote, and we ask them open-ended, what brands are your favorites right now? The number of brands kids quote unprompted as their favorites has gone up by 10%. So the entertainment tail is getting longer and longer, which means kids have more choice. There are more brands out there for them to interact with. But inside this choice, it's as we say here, fattening at the head of the tail. The top 5 brands that they talk about get a greater percentage of kids' entertainment time, a greater share of mind. That's up just in the last in the last 18 months. It's gone up 1.4 percentage points. Creating and distributing content, that means, as we all know in this room, is easier than ever, but being discovered is harder, and even harder is becoming a fixture in kids' lives. Even once they find you, how you become something that's really important to them. The brands that are consistently rising have in common that they act more like platforms, where kids can engage, where they can watch, where they can play with the brands in many different ways across their lives. So you need to find ways not only to break through, but then to become integral to their lives. And that one way to do that is real-life connections. The other relevant element in how kids choose their entertainment is that parents are very, very important to kids, even beyond preschool. We all think of parents as making choices for kids in preschool, but even beyond that, they remain very important. In our trends survey, 70% of the kids 2 to 10 say that they choose content that their parents they know their parents already approve of, or that their parents will approve of. And an even greater percentage, almost 8 or over 8 in 10, choose content with characters that their parents know as well. So it becomes a point of connection for them. And often that means they're choosing very iconic brands. The relationship changes as kids get older, but it's still a very strong relationship. This is our mummometer. Based on photos that kids take when we go into their homes and talk with kids and parents in the home. This one was from a study that was looking especially at boys and their mothers. And you can see that in preschool, you look at the picture, the kids are on their mother's laps. It's an absolute connection. Once they get to 6 to 8, they're still very close by. By the time they get to 9 to 10, moms are still in the picture. They're not necessarily sitting right side by side, but they're still there with the kids. So one reason for the rise of immersive entertainment, like we're going to be talking about today for families, theme parks, hotels, things like that, is that parents and kids alike are looking for shared experiences. They want to spend more time together. We ask parents and grandparents as well about family entertainment. And let's look at this in two dimensions. On the y-axis, what you're seeing here is From this is something that's pure fun to this is something that I perceive as being important to my child's learning or development. And on the x-axis, from it's something I would never use, it's a brand that I don't care about, it's a brand that's not even meant for me to pay attention to this is something that I know, that I use, that I engage with as well. Let's take a look at how parents evaluated these. If you map on this matrix, parents find it acceptable for kids to play with a brand that is not one that they would engage with, as long as they perceive that it is beneficial to their children, that it has some added value for their children. But they're willing to accept a much wider range of brands if they feel it's something that engages them as well. Then it can be something that is pure entertainment or something that's intended for enrichment, as long as they can engage with it along with their kids. So summed up, the parent's ideal is to experience positive moments with their children, or to release their children to, their older children at least, to experiences that they trust. So if a piece of entertainment is able to demonstrate positive and social benefits, parents are far happier to do two things. They allow more usage and they spend more money. Each of our panelists today represents a company that has created an experience or a set of experiences that's designed to do that, that's designed to engage kids and families together, to immerse them in a world or a familiar brand, or in other words, to build in the real world, and sometimes in virtual reality, or the not quite real world, examples of that acceptable zone that I was just profiling there, where parents will eagerly spend time and money. So let's hear from them, and then we'll have some time for discussion and questions afterward. I'm going to introduce the first speaker, and then I'll sit down and join them. We're going to start with Henrietta Hurford-Jones, who's the Director of Children's for BBC Worldwide, and is going to be talking about one project in the UK and one in China.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. First thing I'm going to do is click through, because I'm starting at the end. There we are. So BBC Worldwide, we work very closely with our parent company, the BBC in the UK, as I'm sure everybody here knows, and also have a lot of experience in the world of these kind of live experiences that we'll be talking about today. Mostly, however, previously this has been in a more adult or older children and family way with our bigger brands such as, or our grown-up brands I should say, such as Top Gear, Doctor Who, Earth around our natural history catalogue, and Dancing with the Stars, all Strictly as it is in the UK. But in 2014 we launched CBeebies Land, and you can see some pictures here of the launch, which with our public service partner, and it has been a huge success. It's part of a much bigger game park, Alton Towers, that some people even not from the UK may be familiar with. But CBeebies Land represents a preschool area, and it is exactly what one of those things that David was talking about, taking small children into the world of their brands and allowing them to enjoy them with their families. And basically it's this shared experience, young families creating new experiences together, that is really important, I think. And for us, part of it is about offering something outside of the isolation that sometimes being on a screen can create for children, where, and for adults too, for that matter, where we're all sitting staring at something in our own hands. Instead, this is where families create experiences together. At Worldwide, we usually look for partnerships in this space, and we're looking for long-term commitment and partnerships, which is what Merlin, our partner on CBeebies Land, offered us. And here, it's an immersive experience where basically children, there's a sort of path around the land. There are all sorts of different experiences being given to the families. There are the typical rides, although obviously for this age group that we're talking about, they're not screaming white knuckle rides. We're talking about gentle introduction to the world of being on a ride. And there are also things like, for Mr. Bloom, one of our brands, there's a sort of touching and discovering experience where you walk into the garden. Mr. Bloom is a man who has a whole load of vegetables and hangs out in the garden. And you can go through and you can touch, you can feel. There's also information being imparted. So again, it's that love of getting information from something, but from a live experience that you're experiencing with your family, but also with other children around and other people there to experience it with you. It's an imaginative escape, and it also brings joy and emotional responses, I think. We've seen, how emotional the children get. We have guest appearances with favourite characters such as Hey Dougie or other characters appearing in the park at various times. And again, there are these very emotional responses that these young children have. They love the idea that they are immersed in their brand outside of screen, that they can be in it, actually live it, and to see them running up and hugging Dougie, who is famous for his Dougie hugs, obviously. For those of you that haven't seen the show, you should. That is, again, it's a very great thing to see how much they love that and how much it's important to them, and how much the parents, speaking to what David was saying about how much the parents love to see that too, and appreciate the fact that they're doing all this together with all these characters. You can see in the corner there's Ubicorn and Grandmaster Glitch from Go Jetters. Again, another show that's doing well in the UK and everywhere else in the world that kids respond to in that way. And I think it's having all those responses, as I said, just to repeat, with other children and in a safe walled space with your family as well. And that's very important. Obviously, I should have mentioned at the beginning, CBeebies is a brand that it's sort of learning through play is its great moniker. So these sort of experiences are almost perfect. I mean, this is exactly what's being offered in these live areas. And I think that the rides, the attractions, and the live guest appearances create all that for us. We're actually about to, next year, launch the first hotel exclusively for CBeebies families and very young families, which will be a part of this at Merlin, at Alton Towers. There will be the CBeebies Hotel. And in the hotel, there'll be branded rooms, some CBeebies branded, more sort of generically branded. Others will have actual IP attached. We can't actually tell you which IP, and we can't show you lovely pictures yet because I don't think. No, see, that's it. We can't. Not allowed to go any further because we haven't made the full announcement. But one of the things that we've designed with the rooms is that there will be an adult space and a child space. And the child space will have a wall that's slightly interactive. It will have table for drawing on, and it will encourage a lot of activity whilst you're in the room. So we're looking forward very much to that happening, and we think that's going to be a really interesting extension to the experience because it means kids can be there, or families can be there all day. And the other thing I should say is that because Alton Towers has other, more white-knuckle attractions called things like Scream or I don't know, terrible, frightening things. Older kids are also there as well. So we have, that ability for a family to really, in its entirety, to be enjoying an experience in one place. And it took a lot of time and a lot of thinking about who to partner with, how to make this the best experience for the kid and the children, as well as the parents. So we spent a lot of time on what the food should be like, what the retail environment would be like, because going back to what David was saying, at the end of the day, there may be money involved. There may be, I don't know. And so even looking at the shop in the corner there, the retail space, you'll see it's very carefully designed not to be grabby, as it were. Maybe that's not a word, sorry, too much information. And I think, I should underline again, I think this is really, really important. We're going to move now to something else that we do, just throwing this up so that we can see this as well. In China, we have opened in Shanghai a CBeebies Early Learning Centre. And this is designed to teach young preschoolers English, but very gently, in a guided curriculum on 3 levels to take them through this, but also in a very interactive way. So you'll see here you have your green room where the kids can play and see themselves on screen interacting with the bugs from the CBeebies brand, with the characters from the show. And this is, our partners there are Popular, a Singapore-based company, and they've done a lot of work on the actual technology behind this learning. I'm afraid I'm not an expert. I can't spurt all the facts here, but you can always, we can give you facts afterwards if you'd like to know them. But the overall idea is that there's storytelling, there's move your body, numbers and puzzles, letters and sound, and listening and speaking. So you go through a series of different curricula that are about teaching children, but in a socialized environment where they're all together in the room. There are qualified teachers and researchers who are in there with them. And we use our Popular brands again in order to, within this curriculum, the characters that they're engaging with are characters that they might be familiar with, from In the Night Garden or Hey Dougie or various different IPs that we own. Here you've got another example where you can see the teacher and, there's Move Your Body for sure, up there on the right. That's what's going on there. So we feel quite strongly about this space as being something we want to continue to be a part of. We're opening new, I think we've got 3 more opening this year in China of these centres. We're going to also combine this with older ELL learning. So the new centres will have both this CBeebies element and will be for older kids and a higher curriculum. And that's all I wanted to say, really, about what we're actually doing at the moment. We do obviously do some live events where I'm sure those of you who come from the UK will be familiar with Mr. Tumble and Justin Fletcher and the live events we do in the UK, and we do a lot out in Asia as well, where they're actually on stage for certain festivals or whatever. But we feel that this more long-term engagement and commitment is great, having these solid spaces. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I want to introduce now Catherine Fulton from Viacom, the creative director for marketing strategy and engagement for Viacom Media Networks. And I was going to introduce this as being guerrilla marketing, but I guess it's more turtles marketing, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. So I work for a group called Viacom Labs, and there we're really trying to figure out the future of media and engaging fans in new ways. So Viacom's made up of a portfolio of brands that really aims to put fans first. And Nickelodeon's especially good at this because we create 360-degree touch points that really encourage fan engagement. We really know that when fans love something, they want to own it, see it, share it, co-create it. And so that's why Nickelodeon has such a long history with creating immersive experiences. And we sort of see this manifest in ways where we have these live theatrical events like SpongeBob's new musical. We have retail spaces that we've opened. We also have lots of different resorts and hotels that are opening up all around the world. But as I mentioned before, working in the labs, one of our mandates is to figure out how to engage with fans in new ways. And one thing that we identified as an insight was that, you know, not only do fans want immersive experiences that they can share with people, but they also want to, we saw that in our TV shows, that location itself is actually a major character. So we looked at Airbnb and realized that what people are doing is they're going to new cities and new locations and experiencing things firsthand by other people, and how can we apply this same method to our TV shows and bring our characters and our shows to life in the real world. So, we looked at Ninja Turtles that was releasing its latest Ninja Turtles 2 film, and we realized that Ninja Turtles, the lair itself, was such a major character in the movie. So why not create that in the real world and then list it on Airbnb to allow our fans to experience it and come with their families and give, kids an experience where they can get truly close to the characters that they love. We saw over 4 million plus impressions. We had it sort of over a month period, so this particular experience was a little bit more ephemeral in nature, but we see that we can use Airbnb as a native advertising platform for many of our TV shows, and even see it as a potential new business model if we have more permanent fixtures for people to rent. And another kind of interesting thing was the first time that we listed it over this month, we listed it 3 times so that it wouldn't book out in the first instant, and we didn't put a press release out, and so it took 45 minutes for someone to discover it and then book it, and you saw the first kid that got to stay there with the pizza. But then by the time we listed it the last time, it only took 2 minutes. So it was really interesting to see that this kind of took a life of its own and was put out into the real world and experienced in a very real world environment.
Thank you. I want to go stay. In talking about the CBeebies land, Henrietta talked about the white-knuckle experiences. Helene Juguet from Ubisoft, the Vice President of Business Development for TV and Digital, is going to talk about some of the experiences that they've created for kids and families that do have a little more white-knuckle element to them at times.
Some of them do. Ubisoft, as you may know, is an entertainment company, but we actually start with building the video games. We're video games at heart. And what I hear a lot here yesterday and today is that for most of the IP owners, they start with story. Video games are slightly different. We actually start with building worlds. And in that world, we place strong characters. But we don't write the stories for the players. They write their stories themselves by using the tools we give them. It's somewhat of a sandbox, and we let them play in it. And they each write a different story depending on how they use those tools. So for us, getting in the real world with some experiences is quite important, because it's a way to say, okay, here's the kind of stories you could experience in our world, and here's another one. And as you can imagine, also, video games are not quite in the acceptable zone for parents yet. So we actually can't wait for the millennials to become parents, because then I think we'll get out of there. So getting to build shared experience where kids can actually take their parents, because that's how we work, to see that this is acceptable, and this is a lot of fun. And the thrills are not just about shooting, is quite important for us, and we've started to do a few experiences like that with one of our most known franchise, which is the Rabbits, the one that has been transformed into TV series already, the Raving Rabbits, and it worked really well for us and for many families. So I think it's only the beginning of what we'll be doing. So here's, for example, one of the story we told was at the Futuroscope, which is a theme park in France, and we chose to imagine what would happen if those raving rabbits were actually traveling through time and space through a washing machine, because that's what they do. So we actually asked them to revisit some of the places, like the Far West and the first step on the moon, and it actually is a 3D ride that mixes real life animatronics and digital world, because we're still digital at heart, and the kids are sitting, and parents are sitting on toilets, and they go through a little train through that tunnel, leaving some scenes in history or different places, in the way that, of course, goes wrong because it's led by the rabbits. But that was one of the stories we chose to tell at that theme park. There also was the waiting line, the horrendous waiting line in theme parks. And we figured, okay, what if we were telling another story there? And it's pretty much a rabbit's visit to a museum. And there's references here that actually can make parents laugh, in a way that kids cannot understand because they don't necessarily know who the Joconde is. So they actually sometimes are kind of sad when they have fast passes and they don't get to do the waiting line. They feel like they've missed out, which is really what we want to create. And that's definitely a moment shared by the whole family with different layers. Another thing that we've created that just opened this summer in Montreal, and we're hoping to open more, is a kids' rabbits amusement center. And here the proposal is very simple. It's like unleash the rabbits that's in you, which is pretty much every 4 to 6 year old. And it's pretty much you can play with everything, disrupt. It's a playground, but the rabbit's way, with a lot of references. And here's a little videos that shows you what it is like. And another example, which we've actually placed in the Family Entertainment Center in Montreal, is our 4D VR ride for the rabbits, which is another story that the rabbits take you on, which is pretty much a raving roller coaster. But actually this one you can experience even if you're below the height limit that you would have in a regular roller coaster, or if you're 77 years old and you're afraid that your heart will stop on a real roller coaster. So that's something that you use one at a time, but you can share what you've experienced afterwards, even if you are really, really too afraid to go on a roller coaster. And we get some really amazing reactions from those chairs that are quite exciting. And I'll show you a little video of 2 kids that are on those chairs, and there's some weird Canadian cursing in there, so I didn't quite understand everything, but let me show you how people react on those chairs, and it's quite amazing, funny to watch. That's about, and I did put my legs up, even though I knew the ride and I had done it before, so it's quite impressive. So those are just examples. Of course, to us it's essential to build that relationship with parents and shared moments, which is really usually what triggers the real life experience that we want to do.
Thank you. We've gotten a little bit from what we've heard so far about the what and a little bit about the why, but I want to go deeper into the why. These are obviously more than just marketing experiences for each of your companies. What is the deeper strategy behind it? What is your thinking in connecting with families beyond the screens, beyond your services?
I keep it. If you were here in the talk before, you've also understood the importance of the family moment and sharing moments together, which I think for us in video games is even more important because we're at a place where parents don't really necessarily understand. It's starting to happen, but not yet. So building that kind of relationship is very important for that reason. But it also is something that we've been pushed to do by the fans, because we have very, very committed fans in the video game industry. And they start those things by themselves. They create costumes, they do cosplay, they create tools, they recreate movies online with our characters. They what we call user-generated content. They're really, really keen on that. And then we're like, you know what? We have to give them. Yeah, we have to give them that because they are ready to consume a deep slice of our property. That's quite impressive. And so we want to be able to feed them more and be there in every moment of their lives, multiple touch points, as we were saying before, because it's video games are very long to make. They take 3 years, they take a lot of money, and you cannot be there all the time, even though you're trying to make big experiences that people can play more than 100 hours. But having other touch points in their real life, in their virtual life, online, etc., is a way for them to stay within that franchise that they love so much.
Ooh, all right, I'll go. Well, we're seeing a lot of insight around millennials and Gen Z where they actually want to spend more on experiences than material goods. And we feel that obviously this is a trend that will keep happening, especially with kids. And so we want to give them experiences that they can share. And the reason for that is we feel that identity creation is also being formed with them being able to express themselves through the characters and the shows that they love. And so by giving them these immersive experiences, we're kind of giving them more material to actually share with their friends and form who they are.
I think for us, the first thing is to go back to something you were saying about the demand, because originally I'm with Worldwide, who are the commercial arm of the BBC, and obviously our objective is to try and make money, but the public service side would not think in those terms, but actually understood that there was such a demand for that experience for the families that in the end, you know, we came together to do something like CBeebies Land and to extend that and those experiences. And I think that's exactly right to your point as well about, you know, if people want to spend a little bit of money, they want to spend it on being together and doing something more now than just a thing. So, yeah.
And that's a particular challenge for a public service brand. I mean, the BBC Worldwide is perceived differently in China than it would be necessarily in the UK. I know there are things that BBC can't do out of fear of competing with commercial services or its perception as a public service brand. Does that present challenges when you're developing a hotel, a theme park?
I think it presents opportunities as much as challenges, because it really makes you think about what you're doing. I mean, it's certainly true to say that in the UK, the BBC, nobody really knows who BBC Worldwide are. You know, the BBC is the BBC. Exactly. It is an icon. It is everything that we know about it that's good, and some bad perhaps. But I think it's, you know, and it is very much perceived as something that belongs to the people. And so there was a lot of debate and a lot of time spent in considering what we should be doing, how to make it so that it's inclusive for everybody. And I think you're right, but I think those are good things to think about anyway, you know, and to make sure that you are making it an experience that doesn't feel like some sort of sales gathering, you know, but is actually truly about giving families a proper experience and enjoyment.
I want to talk about inclusivity in a different way. You, Catherine, you've got the advantage that the Turtles have been around a long time. Parents connect with it just as much as kids. They grew up with it. A lot of younger parents grew up with it as well. But when you've got a brand like the Rabbids or CBeebies, how do you make it exciting experience, a fulfilling experience for the parents as much as it is for the kids who are in the actual generation that consumes it?
For the Rabbits, it's basically they're just fun and crazy, and they kind of represent who we were when we were 6 years old. And I think it actually appeals to dads also quite a lot. So we try to play that connection again, and so that even though the dads haven't necessarily played the video game, they relate to those little characters. And we started with videos. It's getting out of the video game into having little videos online, and people were watching them. They were laughing, even though they didn't know the video game. And it took a life of its own that was then acceptable and more easily shareable with everybody.
And Henrietta, you mentioned that the rooms in the CBeebies Hotel will have space for adults and space for kids, but how do you engage adults in the entire experience and multi-generations of kids, or not generations, but multi-ages of kids?
Well, they are allowed to eat and drink downstairs. But I think actually it's slightly different for CBeebies, because we are talking about very young children, and I think really in that respect the adults are taking their enjoyment from the enjoyment of the child. You know, this is bringing something to life in it. I mean, when you see a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 5-year-old child react to these spaces and these characters, you see why the parents are willing to do it. I mean, it is a great experience for them. There's good food, there's entertainment, there's all of that going on. But I think a lot of it at that age group is simply, you know, enjoying the experience the child is.
And something for older siblings so that they don't feel...
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's libraries, there are going to be lots of different spaces within the actual shared areas of the hotel that satisfy all those needs of all the different groups, yeah.
There's one more thing I want to bring up with the panel, but if you have questions, I'm going to come out to you in just a minute, so be ready. The description for this session talked about virtual reality, and only one of the demonstrations included an element of that, and that was in a very safe setting. It was the haptic chair, so they really feel something, but kids are sitting down, they're in a comfortable position, there's somebody watching over it. Dubit is working a lot with virtual reality right now. We're just starting a major study of kids and health and safety issues, but also enjoyment. But still, we're faced with the fact that most of the devices right now say 12 plus or 13 plus. They don't recommend VR for kids. So I know that a lot of children's entertainment companies are really struggling with what their approach should be. Kids love it when they have the chance. Can you talk, just each of you, just talk a little about if you're at a place where you're forming a virtual reality philosophy, strategy, and where you are right now with it?
To us, it comes naturally. So, of course, yes, we are. We have real virtual reality games that are more for older audiences, and we try to. We're in research and development, and we try to see what it would be like. We actually turned our Rabbids TV series into a virtual reality little movie. But the truth is, virtual reality really takes its full power when it has a fourth dimension, which is the movement, and then it becomes a real new kind of experience. Otherwise, it tends to be something that's really nice, really cool. Wow, I'm in it, and it's magical for one moment. You don't necessarily go back to it as much unless you have some kind of interactivity. So it's still a proposal that's kind of complicated to master, to do well, and to get a good ROI, because it's actually very expensive to develop. It requires specific storytelling, so you cannot just reuse what you have most of the time, unlike what was thought before. And it's, I think people are still looking for what's the perfect virtual reality experience. And for kids, they have a tendency to get so involved into what they're thinking that it's actually sometimes, it can be a bit dangerous to get them too involved, because they don't have that capability of understanding what's real, what's not. So you want them to have short experiences that are controlled, and that's why something like the Viewmaster doesn't have a headband. You cannot keep it on, and I think it will be about short experiences that have a fourth dimension. Most likely is the best way to go for kids.
I mean, it's interesting when you see adults put on the virtual reality compared to kids, and adults kind of sit there sometimes, and you have to be like, you can look around, and kids just straight away they're in there. It's very, very intuitive to them. But in terms of where I sort of see the future of it, if you're looking at, say, Facebook, and what they're really pushing is that it's another social environment. So they don't really see it as something that's closed off. And while there will be experiences where it feels very one-on-one and immersive in these, non-linear environments with our characters and shows, I think that there's a huge potential for it actually to be a place where, globally you can connect with other people and you can be in these virtual spaces with other people. And then that allows us to even have parents involved in the experience too. So I think that will help the barrier to allow more children to feel like they have parental, control over what's happening in those environments.
I think for us, we're so far right back at the beginning. We're looking at how, first of all, virtual reality can help in the, or how we can use it in the adult entertainment, that with the more, when I say adult, I mean prime time or, grown-ups, that kind of entertainment. And we haven't started to think about it for the young children that we're serving at all. We're still in the storytelling, starting with the content, and we're very much still in that space for our younger audiences. As I say, for the older stuff, you can see how in Doctor Who and some of the different, there's a way of looking at that, but that's a very different target. So yeah.
And I think each of you has raised one of the big issues, or some of the big issues about virtual reality and kids in particular. One is, how do you do narrative? I think we know how games will be done. We know how experiences will be done. Narrative is going to be much tougher in VR. And then also the idea of short experiences, but also repeatability. I have yet to see much in VR that I feel like you're going to come back to over and over. And I think if parents spend money for a VR experience at home and the kid comes back 5 minutes later and says, okay, done that, bored, that's really going to kill the medium.
For sure.
Any questions from you? Any hands out there in the audience? Yes, back in the back there. Do we have a mic coming your way?
Hello. I'm just wondering about, specifically from Ubisoft, how do you see, we aren't seeing a lot of TV coming in, video game stories being developed for TV, or TV breaching out into video games well, especially, Quantum Break, I believe, was the last great attempt by Microsoft to try and bridge that gap, which did not go that well. Can you specifically say, like, going into VR, how do we even get games on TV before we even jump to that bridge?
As I said, games are tending to be worlds. You build a universe, a world. You put some rules in them, and what we need to learn in the video game industry is how, in this world, we tell good stories. So moving from that to good storytelling is the step that the video game industry has to take. Ubisoft is going to be trying in a few months with the first Assassin's Creed movie. So hopefully that will go better than the previous video game movies that didn't do that great. But it's tough. It's tough because just like good storytelling is tough for any of us. And it's, I think, the same step. We just come from a different environment, different universe, and we have to learn that step. And VR, I would say storytelling in VR is about experiencing more than storytelling. Storytelling is very difficult in VR because you have no director point of view. The director is the viewer. So it completely breaks all the codes of regular storytelling. So there again, I think it's a level ground for everybody that tries to do storytelling in VR. Nobody really knows how to, and whether it's movie industry, TV series, everybody has to relearn those rules and to reinvent them because they don't exist.
I think this raises an interesting question that we just have about a minute and a half left, so it's an unfair question to drop on you at that little time. But all three of you are talking about brands that are essentially narrative, essentially storytelling, and yet we're putting them into the world where you have to give up some control of that story to the fans, where they become involved in it. How hard is that to do, and how do you maintain the integrity of the brand, maintain the essence of the brand when you're giving away control?
I think that's a big challenge, and part of what you have to plan. I mean, you really have to plan, and you have to make sure that those experiences will, however they're experienced and however they're used, will stay true to the original brand values and the purpose of it. And I think for us, certainly with a preschool audience, perhaps that might be easier than with a much older audience that are, taking bigger control. But certainly we think about that and how to make the experience stay true to the brand, however it's experienced and used. So very cleverly, they can open cupboards, they can press things, they can do things, but there's only so much control they can have in the end.
I think the kids inherently have been taking our IP and doing what they want with it. And so, they have such imaginations, and then they watch the show and they watch linear narratives, but to them it means so much more. They're in love with the character, they're in love with SpongeBob, they're in love with the turtles, they're in love with Dora. And so it's quite easy then to give them environments that they can use their own imagination and play with these characters that they love. And I think that it's okay to give up some of that narrative control.
I would agree with that, yeah.
And to us, that's how we build our games. It's like we don't create the story, they do. And we like to call our games anecdote factories because we've managed when they each come to the water cooler the next day, if they're adults with having jobs, and they say, oh, remember what I did in Far Cry and then this happened and the tiger came and then I tried to send a grenade on the turtle to just see what happened. That is quite wrong as a sentence, but and really I set it on fire, yeah. And then that's for one of our more grown-up oriented video game, obviously. But this is natural to us. That's what we do. So then, actually, when we get into the real world, we have a lot of control. It's quite a change. So it's the opposite way we do it. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I'm afraid that's where we're going to have to end it. There are so many other questions I'd love to ask, but thank you to Henrietta, to Catherine, to Helene for joining this panel, and I hope you all have a good MIPCOM.